Today's tutorial is going to be a fierce kitten pattern. This is the Convention Raider Point 2. I've sewed the Point 1 version several times and I really love the pattern. So when she came up with an updated version, a version Point 2, I really want to try it out just to see if I liked it any better than the original. I had no problem sewing the original even on a domestic machine, so I'm really excited to try this one out. I will be doing just a few things differently. One thing I'm not doing is there is a zipper pocket on the flap. I am not adding that, not because I don't like it, but just because I don't want to distract any from the print. I love this print. It is from Retro Stitch, and I really just want to be able to see the print, so I'm skipping that zipper on the front. Another thing I'm not doing is that on the top for the main zipper compartment, there is an option for an overlay. I'm using the traditional zipper method. I will not be adding an overlay, but for this version, I'm going to be using my exterior is from Retro Stitch. My lining is going to be from J&R Edwards. I'm going to be using some hardware, both a magnetic snap and zipper pulls from Natural Nerd. My thread is from Wizardry. My zipper tape is from Altelia. All of my pieces are a cotton woven. I have everything interfaced with a medium weight interfacing that's like an SF101. In my version, I'm using the interfacing from Castine Handcrafted. And then I also have a layer of fleece on my exterior pieces. The pattern pieces have the placements for the zipper boxes on them, so I'm not going to be giving out any measurements. So now that we have all that covered, let's just go ahead and start sewing up this pattern. I'm going to start this pattern by working on the flap. I have an exterior piece and a lining piece. I am not adding the zipper pocket to my flap, but if you want to, go ahead and do that before you go on to these next steps. I am using the type of magnetic snap that's a decorative piece that needs to go through both the exterior and the lining flaps. If you're just using a traditional prong, you could go ahead and install your magnetic snap on your lining piece only. But for me, I'll need to sew this together, turn it right sides out, and then add that magnetic piece. So what I will do is I will start by placing these two pieces right sides together. I'm going to leave my opening here at the top, and I'm going to sew the sides and the bottom with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Now that I have these two pieces sewn together, I'm going to use my pinking shears just around the two bottom curves just to trim up the extra bulk in the seams, and then I'm going to turn this right sides out. If you are using materials that can be pressed with the iron, you can take it over to the iron and give it a good press. I'm just going to roll my seams and then put some of these heavy duty clips on place just to kind of help compress the edges and to make sure it's laying the way I want. Then I'm going to top stitch around the sides and bottom that I just sewed, and I'll baste across the top. Here's how my flap pocket looks. Now, for me, I need to go off camera and install that magnetic snap here in the center. I do kind of hate that I'm going to be covering up these beautiful mushrooms. I did not fussy cut, obviously, and I should have done that a little bit better. It's okay. I still want to use the snap. So I'm going to do that, and then when I come back, I will have this piece done, and we'll move on to the next step. So I have my flap finished. So there is my flap with the magnetic snap attached. I'm going to set this aside until I need it a little bit later. The next thing I'm going to pull out is this top piece. So this is going to be like this front piece, and it's going to attach at the top of the bag, and I'm going to add a zipper to it. This zipper is going to be like the main compartment. It's going to be down the length of the bag. There are several ways to make a zipper pocket on a bag, and I'm choosing the option that I hate the most. I didn't want to use the option where we have the overlay because I didn't want to take away from this fabric. I did not want to do a single piece of fabric because I didn't have a piece big enough and I would lose quite a bit of the pocket. So I'm choosing to use a zipper facing to make this zipper pocket. What I did was I cut a piece of fabric from my lining. I put it right sides together with my top piece. I used the pattern piece for this piece to make sure I had the accurate marks for this zipper box. And so now what I'll do is I'll just sew on these two long lines on this piece to make that opening. Once you have those two lines drawn, then you can just fold this in half and start cutting down the center so that you can be able to push this facing through. I'm going to take this over to the iron. I'm going to push it all the way through. I'm going to press it completely flat. You can see I'm just angling this cut to the edges, but I'm not cutting through my stitches. Do the same thing on the other side, but I will push it through, press it flat, and then we'll come back to show how I add the zipper to the lining pieces and go ahead and complete this pocket. I took the time to make sure that I pushed that facing through and ironed it really nicely, so I have a really good opening here on this top piece. You can see this is the way it looks from the back. So now it's time to install the zipper there. I'm going to start that process by pulling out the two lining pieces. I did just rough cut mine, so I'll be doing some trimming down. I just took the fabric that I had left for the lining and cut it in half. Like I said, that is why I chose this method, because I didn't have a long enough piece to just do one lining piece. So what I'll do is I will take my zipper that already has the pull attached on it. I'm going to line it up with the top of this pocket lining piece. And I'm going to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern all along that top edge to connect these two pieces. Once you have that sewn on, then what I like to do is I like to take this piece and separate it from the zipper so that I'm looking at the right side of the zipper, the wrong side of the lining, and then I tack that edge down. This just gives me a better way to add it to this pocket opening. It just makes it a little bit easier. I'm going to repeat those same steps with this other piece to get it attached. This time I just want to make sure that I line up the sides of that lining pocket just to make sure everything stays straight, because my zipper tape is just a little bit longer than these lining pocket pieces. I'm going to position this pocket piece so that both sides are open and I have my zipper closing to the left. I want to take this top piece and I'm just going to lay it on there, centering it to make sure I have the even amount of space on both sides. And I'm going to get it to where the zipper teeth are right in the middle of that opening on that box. Slide it over to where it's under the needle. And then I'm just going to start sewing around this box about 1/8 of an inch away from that folded edge. So now that you have the zipper attached, go ahead and lift this up so that your pocket piece lays flat. I'm going to take this over the machine and I'm going to be looking at the right side of that top, flip it back, and let's sew down the sides and the bottom. And I like to sew as close as I can to the zipper opening. And like I said, I'll have a lot of trim because I didn't really measure, I just rough cut this. So I'm just sewing across the top and the bottom. I know I'm going to have to trim up quite a bit. If you use the pattern measurements, you would not need to be doing any of this extra trimming. The designer has the measurements to fit perfectly. Now that I sewed down the sides and the bottom of this piece, I'm going to trim up the overhang and then we'll go on to the next step. We are going to start working on that 3D pocket that goes on the front. So I'm going to have 2 of the zipper panel pieces, an exterior and a lining, a zipper pull, the zipper tape, and then what I consider the base gusset pieces, 1 exterior, 1 lining. So we are going to start this by attaching my zipper to the lining piece, place that lining piece right sides up, and I just sit this zipper tape, and I do have mine cut so that it is longer than the zipper panel. I place it down right sides up. So I'm looking at the right side of both of these pieces, and I'm just going to baste this into place. Once I have that lining and the zipper base together, I'm going to pull out my exterior piece. As you can see, mine is directional and I do have it going this way. I would have preferred to have it going the other way, but I did not have a lot of material left, so I didn't want to waste it. Place that exterior piece right sides together with the lining, so you're looking at the right side of your zipper tape, but the wrong side of the exterior piece. Now sew this with the full seam allowance given in the pattern. Once we have those two pieces attached, let's go ahead and pull these zipper panel pieces wrong sides together, baste down this raw edge, and then top stitch down the sewn edge. And let's do both of those stitches with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. When we're looking at this piece, this is going to be considered our front. This front part is going to be what attaches to the pocket piece. This is going to be attaching to the other part of the bag. So I'm going to add my zipper pull, and I'm going to have it closing to the left whenever I have it orientated this way. Then I'm going to trim up the extra zipper tape on the sides, and then we'll add that base piece. We're just going to make a little zipper sandwich here on this edge. So have your base lining piece or the gusset piece right sides up. Lay this zipper piece on top of that, right sides up, matching up that short edge. I'm just going to do a quick baste stitch here. Then I'm going to come back and take this exterior piece and place it right sides together. So right sides down. And this time I'll sew that short edge again, but with the full seam allowance. I'm going to repeat those same steps for the other side before I do my top stitching, just so I can get it all completed. You can see I'm going to have to pull a little to get those all to connect. I'll put a clip there, but you can see there's kind of a gap. It doesn't lay straight. That is normal and to be expected. Let's go ahead and sew these now with the full seam allowance. So the lining is right sides together with the lining, exterior right sides together with the exterior. This is what you should see. Flip this. And now what we're going to do is put those base or gusset pieces wrong sides together. We're going to top stitch on the short sides and then baste down those long edges to make this all one completed loop. So here is how my gusset looks. Make sure you have your zipper pull on and that is closing the way you want it. This again will be attaching to the front pocket piece. This will be attaching to the rest of the bag. So this is the way your gusset will look when it's on your bag. I'm going to go ahead and mark the quarters for this gusset piece, and then also make quarter marks on the panel pieces. So let's pull out those pocket pieces. You will have 3 of those. You will have 2 lining pieces and 1 exterior. On the exterior, go ahead and attach your magnet if you haven't already. Make those quarter marks, and then what we're going to do is we are going to take one of these lining panel pieces, place them wrong sides together, and just baste that all the way around. Now that I have those 2 pieces basted together, what I can do is have the quarter marks match up with the quarter marks on my gusset and clip them right sides together. I'm going to clip off camera, but I'll come back on to show you what it looks like before we sew it, just so you can understand how that goes together and make sure that it fits properly. I clipped that gusset on the front panel and it fit perfectly. It's a very tight fit, and so I can see that my zipper's slipping a little. When you have a tight fit, sometimes that happens. That is nothing wrong. What I'll do is I'll use my hemostats to hold and kind of pull while I'm sewing it. I'll start sewing here at the bottom so that if there is any extra or any stretching, it'll naturally be able to let me have a better fit around the top of this. So if you have a problem with that, try to sew away from that. So start your sewing at the bottom so that when you get here, maybe you'll have a little extra room or give to be able to pull it so that it meets perfectly. First thing I'll do is I'm going to go around here with just my basting stitch. I will come in with the binding and do the full seam allowance, and that's the best way for me to do it, but you don't have to do it that way. You can use whatever preferred way you like to sew or bind whenever you have a gusseted bag. So I have these two pieces, the gusset and this front pocket panel piece, basted in place. Now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and bind. If you have any overhang, anything you want to trim down, go ahead and trim it. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bind around here. When I'm binding, I'm just going to use a piece of fold over elastic or ribbon. You could also use pre-made tape or make your own. And I'm just going to fold it around enough so that I can get that full seam allowance. We want to be really careful. We have this zipper here, and so we don't want to go too close to the zipper or to impede us being able to open this easily. So I'm going to make for sure I give myself plenty of room and just use that exact seam allowance when binding here. I'm going to do my binding off camera because it's the same step of just sewing around. I'll just wrap it around, but I'll make sure that I don't get it too close to the seam allowance. So I'm going to bind this off camera, and then we'll come back for the next steps after I have that completed. I chose to use a ribbon for my binding, and I just wrapped it around, folded it around that raw edge, and bound all the way around the bag. I didn't do the best job. I was just having a little bit of struggle there, but it's okay. What we're going to do now is we're going to top stitch from one side of the zipper to the other. When we top stitch this though, we want to make sure we're pushing that binding down and we're top stitching through it so that it's tacked down. The way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to flip this entire piece out so that I'm looking at the right side, just to kind of help me get a better top stitch. If you feel you would do better doing it the other way, that's fine. Whatever works for you. I'm going to make sure I have this gusset piece out of the way. I'm not using it at all. And I'm going to take that binding, I'm going to fold it back, slip it under my needle, and then go right down to where that zipper starts. Take me a little bit of maneuvering. I do have some bulk there, so I'm going to lift up my foot a little bit higher right here. And then what I want to do is I want to top stitch 1/8 of an inch away, but I'm going to be going really slow and feeling to make sure that bulk is underneath. So when we get up here, I'll flip it under there. So I'll go 1 stitch at a time to get this top stitching started. Okay, I finished my top stitching. Everything looks good, but I have it a little off here, so I want to redo that spot. You can just see where I kind of lose that seam, so I'm going to just correct this spot. But after that, this pocket will be ready attached to the main panel. We're not top stitching down the bottom here, just along the zipper spot. I corrected that top stitching on this pocket. It looks a lot better. Everything looks good. Like I said, it has great structure. She is right on that. Am I a fan of how it looks on the inside? No. Definitely recommend using a matching binding instead of what I did, where this is small and some tight curves. It just doesn't look perfect. No big deal though. This is what I'm going to be looking at, and it is beautiful on the outside. So this is going to be where the flap attaches at the top, and then that top piece with the pocket. This is going to end up having some connectors down here at the bottom to wrap around the thigh. This is the front exterior piece. I will have a back piece as well. For this piece, the pattern gives us sets of measurements. We first mark the centers and we draw a line all the way down. Then we come down a set amount and draw a horizontal line, and then we're going to use the pattern piece that is given with this pattern, and it says on it that it's just used for marking. We're not using it to cut out any fabric. You're going to take that and place it on here and trace around. I did this all on the back so I could show you. I don't like to give measurements or anything like that on camera, but I still want to be able to show you this clearly. I knew on a dark print it would be a little bit harder. So if you were doing this on the front side, definitely use a chalk or something that can be easily removed. So this is the markings I have. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out this circle piece, and I'm going to end up using this as a frame to install that 3D pocket. So this shell is, or frame, is what we're left with. Let's go ahead and turn this right sides up. So I'm looking at the right side. Go ahead and grab out that front 3D pocket piece, the zippers at the top, and just set it down there and have it sitting on top. So we're looking at the right sides of both. Now what I want to do is I want to take this top piece and I'm going to flip it up. So let me turn this so you can see. So I'll start by flipping this up and matching the quarter mark. These quarter marks were made earlier from whenever I was first adding the gusset to that panel. So you can see I'm just clipping and matching those quarter marks. I'm going to add a few more clips right around this top here to kind of secure that in place so it won't be shifting, and then we'll do the same thing with the other quarter marks. This is letting this frame be right sides together with this 3D pocket piece. So now I have this clipped around. Here's how it looks from the right side. Here's how it looks from that lining side. I'm just going to base this in place. I already know that I'm going to have to come back and attach a lining here. I'll get the full seam allowance in, so I'm just going to baste it around here. You could baste it however you wanted. You could baste it from this side, but I'm going to baste it from this side and just go all the way around. Definitely do whatever you feel is best and the way you feel most comfortable doing this. When you're going around these curves, you're going to want to make sure to take your time, that you're not sewing over any puckers or anything like that, because we have a lot of extra bulk. You can see it's kind of puckering here, but as long as I make sure that when my needle goes over it, there's no puckers, I'm good to go. So I'll just kind of be flattening and feeling this entire time. After you sew that, make sure you go around and check that all the corners caught. I had one that I had to go back and fix, so make sure you check that. Take this other lining piece. This is your last lining piece like that. If you haven't already marked the quarters on this one, go ahead and do that. And then match them up with the quarter marks already made on this other piece. So I will have the linings right sides together and then just start matching up these quarter marks. Now this time I definitely have to sew with the full seam allowance to get everything attached and to make sure I have everything secure, as this will be the last step on finishing up this pocket. Now I have that lining clipped all the way around. I'm looking at the wrong side of that lining piece, the wrong side of this piece, and if we flip it over we can see the right sides of the pocket. I'm going to sew with the full seam allowance. I'm going to attempt to sew it like this. If you have a cylinder arm, this would be a great place to use it. But since I don't and I have a flatbed, I'm just going to go slow and try to use my hemostats to keep everything in line. The designer does tell you that you could staple around here to make it a lot easier. So that is some options. I'm going to do this step off camera because it's going to be the same thing, just sewing around. Then when we come back, we will top stitch this and then go on to our next steps. So now I have that lining attached, and I made sure that I just did 1/4 of an inch all the way around. I did not go any past. I was very careful with that part. So now what we need to do is we need to top stitch. My mind keeps telling me that I want to push this seam towards this piece here. This is our B piece, and top stitch through it. But the designer tells us no, do not do that. She said if we do that, we're actually going to have some pulling on this material and it won't fit. What we have to do is we have to tuck this seam towards this lining piece, and we're actually going to top stitch all on this gusset. Now this, I'm not for sure how mine's going to look. I'm a little nervous about it, but I'm going to do exactly like the designer says. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up so I can be able to feel around there and get a good top stitch on this. So I'm putting it under my needle. I'm making sure that seam allowance is under this gusset piece. The designer also tells us that this part where the seam is going to be our bulkiest part. I can definitely feel the bulk. She says if you want, you can use a hump jumper. If you're on a domestic and it just refuses to go over it, you can sew up to this point, back stitch, and then skip it and then sew over here. So that is some options. So let's go ahead and start by pushing this lining. And I'm going to start here where the zipper is, and I'm going to push that lining to where it's underneath the gusset. I'm just going to do 1/8 of an inch all the way around to secure that seam allowance to this gusset piece. All in all, I did not do that bad on the top stitching. Everything looks pretty decent. I have one spot I need to clean up, and I do see how this is laying so much better now that I have that top stitch. I did top stitch it that way. Super good. I'm very pleased with it. So now we're going to go on to the next steps of adding the flap and that top piece to this bag. So now that we have this front pocket piece finished, it's time to go ahead and pull out that flap piece. I'm just going to attach it on here so I can make sure I have it orientated decently on there. I'm going to come to the back and I'm going to match this raw edge with this top edge here. I already have the center mark, so it's not going to be too hard to match everything up. I'm going to place some clips here, and then I'm just going to do a basting stitch. Once you have that flap attached, go ahead and pull out that top piece that has the zipper pocket on it. We're going to attach this straight edge to the top of this bag. We're going to line it up all the way across here, clip, and then we will sew it with the full seam allowance on the pattern. Make note that this is a larger seam allowance that you'll be sewing this on. The designer tells you can trim it down, but do not trim down the part where the flap is. We want to leave all of that intact for integrity of the flap. So I'm going to place these two pieces right sides together. I want to make sure I keep that pocket piece out of the way so there's no risk of it getting caught while I'm sewing. Now that we have those two pieces sewn together, let's go ahead and flip that up. Keep that lining piece out of the way. Have your seam allowance going up so that we can attach it to the top of this piece. So your seam allowance is up under this top piece, and that's where we're going to sew. Make sure your lining is pushed out of the way, and you probably will have to use your fingers to kind of make sure that seam stays up, because it'll have a tendency to want to flip down. This is looking amazing. Look at that. That is gorgeous. I love it. I do need to trim up my pocket some. I knew there was a risk for that where I didn't measure mine, so I'm going to trim this up off camera, and then I'll come back and we'll do our next steps. Now what we need to do is go ahead and pull out that back piece. So we are going to attach it right sides together, and we're going to leave an opening here at the bottom to turn it through. Now for these straps, I am going to rivet them in place. There is a different way to kind of sew them in the seam lines, but I'm going to follow the designer's ideas and thoughts about riveting will be a more sturdy way to do it with webbing, so I'm going to do it that method. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip this all the way around, and then I'm going to sew it all the way around, leaving an opening here at the bottom of the bag, and then I will turn it through. I'm going to do those steps off camera just so I can get these done, but I will sew with the seam allowance given the pattern, matching up all these edges, taking my time to go around. When I come back, I will have everything turned right sides out, and then we will just talk about how we are going to top stitch and then finish by adding those connector pieces. So I sewed the back and the front right sides together. I left the opening at the bottom. I turned it right sides out, and now I've got it all clipped, ready to sew close the bottom and top stitch all around. Let's just peek at the back. You can see it's ready to go too. So I'm going to top stitch all around here, and then we only have a few steps left. To do the connectors, I want to show you the connectors. You're going to cut the pieces of webbing, and then you are going to fold the raw edges to the center. And I just kind of do a press there, and then I add a D-ring. I like to use a little bit of glue to hold this in place so that I can top stitch around there. So I do glue. You can use double-sided tape or you can just use clips, whatever you prefer. You are going to top stitch all around here, and then it will look like this. You will have 4 of these, 2 for the bottom, 2 for the top. The pattern piece has marks for rivets. You're going to rivet these into place just using those marks on the pattern. If you wanted, you could sew them, but I'm just going to rivet. It's going to be easier, and I feel like it'll be a little more secure. So after I top stitch, I will rivet these in place, and then I'll come back and show you how all that looks. And then the bag will be finished except my straps. And I'll just be making a basic strap following the pattern with an adjustable bar. You'll make a strap for both your thigh and for your waist. So I'm going to finish up these steps, and then we'll come back to look at it all completed. When I top stitch this, I'm just going to do 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around, and that will help me close up that bottom as well as having a nice finish all the way around the bag. My convention raider version 2 is completely done, and this turned out better than I ever could have imagined. I do like the way this comes together, much easier. The binding on the pocket, sewing it down whenever you're top stitching, was the only thing I felt was really tricky for me. Other than that, this is great. So on yours, you may want to put a zipper pocket here. You can do that. I just chose not to, but when you open it up, you do have this full pocket here. This is a full pocket all the way down the bottom. So while this doesn't look like super wide, that 3D pocket gives us a lot of depth there, so it can hold a lot of things. The back, if you wanted, you could even put like a slip pocket here if you wanted to. This would be against your leg or your body, so you would only use it to like hold thinner, flatter things. But this pattern is great. It's not super time consuming, but for me, I wanted to make sure I really did a good job. So I redid anything that I make a mistake on, like I redid top stitching once because I didn't like the way it looked, and I was just being really careful and taking my time putting this together. Not a hard pattern to sew, just a couple of little finicky spots on it. My fabrics on this are all a cotton woven. The exterior print is from Retro Stitch. I'll have the link in my description. The lining is from Jane R. Edwards. The webbing, the hardware, the zipper tape, that is all from Altelia. I'll have the link for that as well. The magnetic snap as well as these enamel mushroom zipper pulls are from Natural Nerd. The pattern is from Fierce Kitten. All of this information, of course, will be in my description. Wonderful pattern that will help me be out in nature more, will help me be able to walk outside more without any pain or any back problems. So I'm very excited to try this out. I hope today in your sewing room that you're able to use your sewing skills for something that will help you just have a better day and to be out in nature a little bit more and just enjoy the day. Thank you so much for watching another one of my tutorials, and I hope you have a wonderful day.